I'd like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, February 25th, 2020. The Portland Board of Public Education is meeting in Casco Bay High School in the Great Space. May I please ask the superintendent to call the roll?
Yes, Chair. Mr. Atkinson?
Here.
Mr. Balfons?
Here.
Ms. Bondo?
Présente.
Mr. Burke?
Here.
Ms. Figdor? Ms. Morioni?
Here.
Ms. Thompson?
Here.
Mr. Laro?
Here.
Ms. Brown? Mr. Casiel Reyes?
Here.
Ms. Habib Saeed?
Here.
Mr. Parrott? Ms. Yangala?
Present.
And Chair Rodriguez.
Presente. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For the report of the chair, I wanted to just quickly welcome everyone back from February break. I hope we had a restful pause from the school year, and that we are returning to our schools energized and ready to for the home stretch, so to speak, of the calendar year. For the report of the students, we're due for Deering High School report. So we have Ms. Habib Sai ready to report. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Deering High School has had a busy schedule in the past month. We are now almost a month into our new semester schedule, which started on January 21st. On January 22nd, Deering High School hosted its annual 8th grade open house, which included participation from Deering administration, students, and parents to welcome prospective students to Deering. The days following the open house consisted of the middle school step-up days, with King on January 24th, Lincoln on the 27th, and Lyman Moore Middle School on the 28th. Our Black Students Union, along with other BSU students of Portland High School and Casco Bay High School, received proclamation recognizing Black History Month. The mayor presented the proclamation to the students. It was great to see the community coming together to recognize the significance of Black history. Kudos to our BSU students and their leaders in particular. On January 30th, Deering High School opened up the Lounge Club to its students. In an effort to provide a variety of after-school options, the Lounge Club is a place for students to socialize, play games, listen to music, and get snacks after school on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 2:30 to 5. The Lounge is a supervised, safe space located in Deering High School's cafeteria. After finishing in the top 5 at the Southern Maine Regional Finals on February 10th, Deering's Poetry Out Loud champion, Daniela Arie, has advanced to the state competition taking place on March 2nd in Waterville, Maine. Deering seniors Sunday Nintoto and Sarah Ali performed as a part of the Pinsintu Multicultural Chorus at the United Nations in New York on February 11th. On February 8th, the Deering debate team qualified for the National Speech and Debate Tournament hosted in Albuquerque, New Mexico from June 14th to June 19th. The following weekend, on February 15th, the Deering debate team qualified for the National Catholic Forensic League Tournament hosted in Chicago, Illinois on May 23rd to May 24th. On Wednesday, February 19th, the Deering boys basketball team played in the semifinals against Bangor High School, winning 57-51 and qualifying for the Northern Regional Finals, which they played on Saturday, February 22nd against Edward Little. Deering student government has been in talks about making Deering a more green environment. This includes school-wide activities like picking up trash around the school and organizing a field day where students are informed about ways they can contribute towards keeping Deering green and clean. This event would take place sometime in the spring around April or May. Last, on April 3rd, Deering will be hosting a shared space cafe in collaboration with Portland Empowered. And that concludes my report on Deering. Thank you.
Thank you, Sahar. Great job. Next, for the report of the superintendent, Mr. Botano, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to begin my comments today by recognizing the original inhabitants of the land on which our city and schools stand, the Maliseet, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes, known collectively as the Wabanaki, or people of the Dawnland. We're honored to have their children among our students in our schools today. Condolences on behalf of the entire Portland Public Schools family to the family of Jim Banks, who passed away last week after a long battle with cancer. Jim served 15 years on the Portland Public Schools Board, including 3 stints as chair. Recently, the city recognized his service to the city by renaming the expo the James A. Banks Senior Exposition Building. This fitting tribute recognized Jim's visionary effort to save the expo in the 1980s by making it the proud home of the Portland Public Schools high school sports. He also served on the State Board of Education, including as its chair. I had the pleasure of working with Jim in 2017 when we unsuccessfully petitioned the State Board of Education to extend the state major construction project list long enough to have Reike School funded by the state. Jim was generous with his time and wisdom and helped me to begin to understand Maine school construction, history, and politics. He was a passionate advocate for our schools and cared deeply about the well-being of our students. The City of Portland and the Portland Public Schools have lost a true civic leader with his passing. Rest in peace. Last week, the City Council approved the Competitive Energy Services CES Partnership Agreement, which paves the way for converting more than two-thirds of Portland Public Schools' energy usage to solar energy. We're excited to bring this initiative, which has been deftly championed by our students through the Solarized effort, to fruition. On a related note, on March 5th, the Operations Committee will review a proposal by Solarize Portland to build a visible example of our commitment to renewable energy on the Deering grounds. The student-led Solarized effort has raised enough money to offset the costs of this project. And to that end, I would like to take a moment to congratulate the Solarized students and especially Casco Bay senior Siri Pierce, who capped the fundraising by being awarded $5,000 when she was named the Rep My City United Way Pop-Tarts winner for the state of Maine. Tomorrow, the board's Public Affairs Committee will host our annual budget forum. This event is intended as a primer on public school finance in Maine, the state of PPS's budget, and a preview of the FY21 budget priorities, which will be reflected in my budget presentation on March 10th. Next week's board meeting will include a final building block in the priorities conversation, as we will focus on quantifying our special education and LAU plan implementation needs. We will shortly begin the interview process for the Deering High School principal. We've identified the interview teams, which will include staff, students, and parents. We feel good about the depth of the pool of qualified candidates and are on schedule to bring you a recommendation by early April. As you heard earlier, the DHS debate team continues to roll. 4 members qualified for nationals scheduled in New Mexico and I guess in Chicago as well this summer. Congratulations to our PHS and DHS, our PHS girls and DHS boys basketball team. Both played regional finals on Saturday, and although they both came up just short in those games, they played like Bulldogs and Rams and were proud of their great seasons. King Middle School's expedition, Pathways to the Plate, has been recognized as 10 under 20 by the Food Impact Summit organizers. The school will receive a $2,000 cash award that will help them to continue their conservation efforts, and they will receive recognition at their conference scheduled for this summer at Harvard University. And last but not least, in our long list of school recognitions, Lyseth's Immersion Program is one of 4 elementary schools selected as candidates to be School of the Year by the Spanish Embassy here in the U.S. This Thursday, February 27th, which is a really busy day, from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at Lincoln Middle School, Parent University will host the rescheduled session on Internet safety, protecting your children from the dangers of the web. Jane Hitchcock, a cybersecurity author and international expert, will talk about cyberbullying, social media safety, including the latest sites and apps that kids are using now, sexting, how to keep children safer online, and how to talk to children about online safety. This is a very timely topic and an example of the tremendous work that the Portland University is doing to engage parents in topics related to successfully raising children. We are scheduled for a district building advisory committee meeting this Thursday. It's an important meeting as it will dive into the estimates for construction, costs and ways to reduce scope to meet our budget capabilities. The meeting will be at 6 p.m. in the district central office, and for those who don't know, we will be holding a workshop after tonight's meeting for the board so that the board can come up to speed on this issue. And tonight's agenda includes a first read of our proposed 2021 school year calendar and the Portland Adult Education proposed calendar. Notable in the proposed calendar is that we will be starting the school year before Labor Day because of the late day for Labor Day this year. Also, as part of next year's calendar, we are proposing to have 4 early release days for our elementary and middle school students next year. These dates will allow us to provide in-depth professional development as part of our new math program implementation. And as many of you know, our high schools have been doing monthly early releases for several years, and we've been working with the City Recreation Department now to provide rec early on the days that we have those early releases. So I look forward to discussing the calendar in more detail with you at the next board meeting, and you have on your desks, I see, a revised and much prettier version of the calendar than what was attached to the formal agenda. So we have Dr. Valenzuela to thank for beautifying that calendar. And with that concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent. Next, report of the Secretary. Consideration and action to approve the minutes of the meeting of January 21st, 2020. Is there a motion? Ms. Bondo, second by Ms. Morioni. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none. Any public comment on the motion? Seeing none. Any board discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the meeting of January 21st, 2020, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting.
One abstention, I wasn't here.
Oh, I'm sorry, with one abstention. So that's 8 in favor, 1 abstention, and the students voting with a majority. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Next, consideration and action to approve the minutes of the meeting of February 4th, 2020. Is there a motion? Ms. Morioni, second by Mr. Burke. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none. Any public comment? Seeing none. Any board discussion? None either. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the meeting of February 4th, 2020, please indicate. And Ms. Thompson, I'm saying, so that's 8 in favor. Ms. Thompson, were you not here for that one?
I was on the country for the first one, and then, I don't know. But I wasn't here for either one of them.
Oh. That's,
You're actually listed as being there.
Oh, I was.
so maybe we need to.
Okay, well, I guess I was there. I'll be in favor.
Yeah, I think that when you came in,
That's why I came back from the country. Okay.
yeah, you were jet lagged.
Partially back.
Clearly. So should we? Why don't we? Let's vote again so that we can get you
I'm sorry.
unanimous. Thank you all.
It was twisted.
Next, for report of the committees, we'll start with Curriculum and Ed Planning Committee. Mr. Balfans, you have the floor.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to let everyone know that our next meeting will be at Central Office on Wednesday, March 11th at 5:30 p.m. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Balfans. Operations Committee, Ms. Thompson, you have the floor.
I think the superintendent stole half my thunder here, so, as part of his presentation. But as he stated, the DABC that I'm the co-chair of will be meeting this Thursday, February 25th, 6 p.m. in the Amanda Rowe Conference from here at Central there at Central Office, not here. We also will be having a LICEF project update memo coming out. There's been some requests from the members of that community as well as the members of the BLAC. So we're working with the architects to get a memo out to that community as well as the community as a whole. I just want to briefly thank all of the people that have been appointed so far to the various BLACs, and we appreciate your patience in the holding pattern that we're in currently while we work through the discussion of BFOF. And as he said, we have a presentation tonight on the school projects to bring the board up to speed, and that's it. And sorry. No, it wasn't it. The Operations Committee, we haven't had a meeting because of the ongoing operations staff has been involved with the DABC initiative. So we are scheduled to meet on March 5th, and We are going to have an update on the CIP and State Revolving Fund, which happy to report that we were awarded almost $2 million in the state revolving loan funds. And we'll also be discussing the CIP. The full CIP recommendation by the board has been advanced by the city manager to the council for consideration, and we'll learn whether it is approved in full or modified by the council come March. And as the superintendent also discussed at our March 5th operations meeting, we'll review plans for the installation of the solar display outside of Deering High School. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Finance and Personnel, Ms. Trevorrow.
Thank you, Chair. The Finance Committee met on February 13th, and in that meeting, we discussed some food services items that will have budget implications this year. There's a memo in the packet about that. We discussed the Breathe revenue update and a memo that we'll be sending to the City Council. They had asked for clarification around that issue. We discussed the state funding formula and the EPS allocation that we received. And we had a general FY21 budget discussion, which was very fruitful. It was kind of our last discussion about the budget before we get the superintendent's presentation of his budget. So we are heading now into the heat of budget season. And on Tuesday, March 10th, we'll be having a special meeting of the board for the presentation of the superintendent's recommended FY21 budget. And the next Finance Committee meeting will be on Thursday, March 12th at 6 p.m. in the Rowe Memorial Room at Central Office. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. If you don't mind, I just wanted to add that as part of that meeting, there was a pretty detailed memo explaining the change in state subsidy that we've shared already with the council and our Portland delegation, and that was something that we wanted to make sure happened because it was something that the council asked us to take care of. So, moving on, Policy and Legislative Affairs Committee. Ms. Victor is not here. Do we have a report in?
Not specifically, Mr. Townsend. Do we have anything that when we have a ton of work that's happening, so it might be helpful just to update the non-members.
Good evening, everybody. So in terms of Policy Committee, we have a few items on the agenda tonight that we've been moving through. So we've been continuing with our review of the books. So we're now at Book B for approval tonight, a second read. We had done a first read of the Administration of Medicine policy. So the Policy Committee had reviewed that. That's on the agenda tonight. And then we had some discussions around our work moving forward and kind of how we're organizing our work around the equity policy review. So if for the full board, the reminder that last year, the Center for Educational Equity was asked to do a review from an equity lens around some of our student discipline policies. So we got back their report, in the late fall, early winter. And so we've now started to kind of agendize working through some of that policy stuff to think about the implications for those changes as it relates to that. And then we've continued working, and kind of updating with the Policy Committee, but our subcommittee on sexual harassment has continued meeting. So we've had now 2 meetings. The last one was really powerful. We are, kind of led by a number of students and youth engaged activists to kind of bring that conversation from the youth perspective to drive the work moving forward. So that continues. We have that next meeting with that subcommittee coming up next Wednesday. So those subcommittee meetings have been the first Wednesday of the month. And then we have our next Policy Committee meeting on Thursday the 5th.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. And I'm sorry, I failed to say earlier, Ms. Victor did tell me ahead of time she wouldn't be here today. She's in California in a retreat for her job that that was scheduled way in advance. So again, I forgot to mention that earlier. Next, Public Affairs Committee, Ms. Bondo, you have the floor.
We just had our meeting earlier today, and we were updated on the public relations plan. So we just hired a consultant who's going to the different aspects of the ambassador training. Then we want to make it happen. Also, we had a feedback on the survey and focus group questions. Then we want to go to the parents, staff, and students. How much they value the Portland Public Schools. So we've been all coming with some inputs from the committee to make sure that all those questions are aligning to the Portland Promise. And also we have our public forum tomorrow, where I think the superintendent just mentioned that we're going to have a preview of the FOI 20 and some of the process on the finals. And it's going to be tomorrow at East End School and from 6 to 8 p.m. So we just invite most of the public to come and to share and have some question and answers. So what we have. So our next meeting is going to be on March 3rd if we don't have any change coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mondo. Appointments Committee, Ms. Morioni.
Thank you, Chair. We don't have anything to report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other committee or member concerns? Ms. Thompson?
I just wanted to, under other committee and member concerns, why I was a little space cadet here, on the report of the secretary. So next board meeting, I can't wait to present to all of you my trip to the Dominican Republic to build a school there, representing the National School Board Association. It was an unbelievable experience, and I would go back tomorrow. And I wanted to bring all the students back here as well, but they're very happy where they are. But I can't wait to share with all of you. It was a very, very moving experience, and I'm thankful for the opportunity. So thanks.
Absolutely. And we're looking forward to hearing that. Yeah, really looking forward to hearing that. Any other member concerns? Nope. I just want to add, Superintendent mentioned the Parent U event this week on Thursday. Next week on March 4th, there's another Parent U event. It was rescheduled because it was snow day earlier this year. So it's going to be March 4th from 5:30 to 7:30 at King Middle School. And topic is going to be understanding the college process. And it's going to be presented by our high school counselors. So I'm looking forward to that. Even as a parent of a sixth grader, I think I should start figuring out how the college process works. Pardon me? Can't start too early. Yeah, it's definitely saving money already, I'll tell you that. Next, consent items. Will the superintendent please read the list of items donated to the district?
We do not have any items, so I know, sorry.
So we passed the hat around.
I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to Gail. She didn't stay for this meeting. So.
It's still early. She'll make a cameo, I bet.
Just knitting hats now.
Funny. I usually don't feel good about not having a list of donations. I know they're there. We just don't have the list ready.
Yeah.
All right.
You know, it was kind of a weird week, so maybe.
It is a weird week.
We
Yeah.
didn't get everything in that we needed to. So.
That's all right. We'll have an extra long one next time. Next, for the board focused on educational issues, we have an update on the high school athletics and co-curricular participation and expenditures. Superintendent, are you going to set us up?
Yep.
You have the floor.
So today's board focus serves a dual purpose. Our staff are going to update the board on the district's participation and expenditures for co-curricular activities. The last time the board received this type of an update was during the 2018-19 school year. And as the board knows, co-curriculars was one of the areas identified by the cost reductions work group this fall. So this is an opportunity for the board to have a full understanding of the nature and extent of the expenditures associated with our co-curricular programming as we enter the budget process. Additionally, staff are seeking board members' guidance on the parameters for consolidating and forming co-ops with other districts and schools in the future. As you may recall, we had a situation this fall where there was a request to co-opt the boys and girls hockey teams with Chevrolet. I decided not to pursue that co-op opportunity based on information from the athletic directors about the anticipated number of players. Additionally, after discussing this with Chair Rodriguez, we decided to make sure that we had a substantive conversation with the full board about the parameters for such consolidations going forward. While no action will result from this conversation today, we envision bringing forward a resolution or action item for you to take based on tonight's discussion somewhere in the future. So tonight, Assistant Superintendent Aaron Townsend and our high school comprehensive high school principals and athletic directors Rob O'Leary from Portland High School and Mike Daly from Deering High School will lead us through a presentation and discussion, and I'm grateful to all 5 of them for their work on this, as well as Executive Director of Budget and Finance, Miranda Fasulo, for their hard work in preparing for this discussion. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron.
That's not me. So thank you, everybody. We're excited to be here tonight. And I think, by way of introduction, of course, Principal Abdullahi from Deering High, one of our co-principals, Principal Sheila Jepson at Portland High, and then Rob and Mike will get an opportunity to present here in just a moment. I want to, spoke to kind of the purposes, the overview around participation in expenditures, and then we'll talk specifically around the co-ops and some of the considerations around that issue. But before I transition it to the team to help lead us through the presentation, it just occurred to me as we rolled through the beginning part of this meeting, the number of different opportunities that various co-curricular activities got called out through either the student board report, right, the superintendent's report, the board chair's report, that there are a number of instances of both athletic as well as co-curricular opportunities that were highlighted as successes and opportunities, and it, just stood out to me, right, given the nature of this conversation about how much that is a part of kind of the discourse around what's happening in our schools, what our students are pursuing, and the kind of opportunities available to them. So I thought it was interesting to kind of reflect that back of where the conversation was as we opened today's meeting. So with that, I'd like to invite Mr. Mike Daly, who's in his first year, has been doing an awesome job at Deering for us this year, to initiate kind of the presentation.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me. Good to see you. First, our philosophy statement for co-curriculars. It's anything that's really out of class activities. So that could be a club or activity or an athletics or a club or an intramural program in either of the high schools. And co-curricular means it's part of the curriculum, part of the educational process, and that's how we consider it at both high schools. And as we get into the next slide, that will make a little more sense. So the way I was thinking from a vernacular was it's education-based athletics, which aligns with the Portland Promise. So it's education-based athletics. It's not a separate piece of it. It's part of the educational process. And so that is what we're looking to do through the Portland Promise, through education-based athletics, is to prepare and empower the student athletes with life skills, leadership skills, social skills, teamwork skills, so they can go out and be successful adults in the next, either in college, when they go on to college, or in the professional realm. 97% of the Fortune 500 CEOs played high school sports. So we hope some of our students are future CEOs as well. For our high school offerings, we have 29 varsity athletic programs, 59 athletic teams, so that includes JV and first team opportunities, and over 42 co-curricular programs. And again, most of these programs are consistent throughout the high schools. Currently, field hockey, ice hockey, boys and girls, and Nordic ski are cooperative programs. And so that jersey right there is our girls ice hockey cooperative game jersey. For athletic programs, these are our fall, winter, and spring offerings. Winter ends up being the busiest season in the high schools because we have 2 basketball teams, 2 hockey teams, Nordic skiing, indoor track, boys and girls. So it's a busiest season overall. So we just made it through. And actually, we're still going on with hockey tomorrow night, Rob. For co-curricular programs, these are just a sampling between the high schools. There's lots of opportunities for our students. They come into my office and Rob's office every day with new ideas for programs. We just started up our Muslim student organization this year at Deering. We just had ping pong and gaming organization started at Portland High School. And then the debate team obviously had a great year so far. So we're very privileged and honored to work with our students in all of these activities to help them participate in a co-curricular environment. Now I'll hand it back over to Aaron. To Rob. Apologize.
Hi guys, thanks for having me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about participation between the district and also separate Portland and Deering High School. The first slide you see starts in 2010. Kind of gives you a ebb and flow over the next 10 years of participation district-wide, boys and girls. And you can see, we're a little bit down from where we were in 2010, but probably back up on the rise again starting in 2019-20. This slide here shows you the differences between the two schools. The last decade, there was an increase, obviously at Deering High School, and then Portland High School is now increased a little bit. It's kind of an ebb and flow over 4 to 6 year period. Shows you the incline and decline of participation in those two schools. The next slide shows you the actual percentage of student body that's participating in athletics. If you added co-curricular into this, those numbers would double between clubs, activities, and intramurals. Shows you between a quarter and a third of our students are engaged in athletics at each school, which is very promising for us. Breaks it down by season. As you can see, soccer is our largest number and growing. In the past, we've added teams. At Portland, we've had up to 4 teams when we could, if schedule allows, to make sure that everybody gets to play. So we'd have either 2 JV or 2 freshman teams when we can, and if we're not running something else that season. Winter sports, basketball's most popular, followed by track. Nordic ski took off this year at Portland High School. We had an influx of students who decided that they were going to try Nordic ski, and we actually have a state champion. Liam Niles was a Class A state champ in Nordic ski. Spring sports, again, this is just a chart to show you, but it's, if you checked out the National Federation of High School Sports, nationally, we're right in the mix of sports that are up and down. Baseball's kind of on the decline nationally. Lacrosse is on the incline. It's just a flow that's happening across the country, and we're starting to see it a little bit here in Portland. I'm going to turn it back over to Aaron for the investments piece.
So continuing to kind of walk through, so that's a picture of what our participation has looked like a little bit over time, and certainly kind of what it's looking like currently in the current academic year. So this slide just represents over the course of time, 2010, 2017, which was the last time there was a board report, so that's why kind of we continued to kind of build off of that, and then this most recent year in 2020. So, and we'll summarize this again in a later slide, but what you see is roughly overall about a $600,000 increase from over the past decade, and the proportions in terms of what's allocated towards athletics and co-curriculars remaining relatively consistent over that period of time. The next slide breaks down just of the athletics costs, how those costs are broken out into categories. So you can see that the primary expenditures revolve around the staffing, right, which is consistent with all of the rest of our budget. It mostly goes to people. So the largest bucket going to our coaching stipends, followed by the staff support, right, to help facilitate and manage all of these programs. Then the next one are all non-salary costs, including the officials, which we'll talk about a little bit in a bit, but that's kind of a contracted service, so it's not ours, that we control. And then the biggest one, additionally, is rentals and field maintenance, so we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The purpose of this slide is just to give a little bit of context of kind of comparison about like the growth of the athletics investments over time as compared to the district budgets. So you can see here, that both have seen, significant rates of increase. The athletics a little bit higher, while it's been flat or a little bit decreasing in terms of the number of students. So thus, the average cost per participant has gone up significantly as we've had revenue increases over time, and flat or lower enrollments given, depending on the year. So, but again, that mirrors to some degree what the district's financial picture has looked like over the past 10 years with increases in overall district budget and relatively flat enrollment. So the last of these slides is kind of the summary to kind of call out in terms of, where costs stand. So, the big themes around the expenditure conversation for high school athletics is that, one, just to kind of put it in context, it represents about 1.5% of our overall budget. So that's what's dedicated towards high school athletics. Within that, as we said in that prior slide, costs have been rising at a bit faster rate than the district, despite flat or kind of declining participation numbers, and that the kind of key drivers of some of that increase are those non-salary costs. So that's what we have highlighted in the chart over on the side. And the most significant one there to speak to is the field maintenance. So in this, this is a budget that's actually housed within facilities, and we're kind of in conversation with the city about so that's part of a city chargeback, right, for the services that they provide in terms of our fields as well as other, what we understand to be some other, maintenance, issues. So in some of that increase, our facilities folks are in partnership with trying to get all of the detail about that rate of increase. There is some history of a rate of increase happening post the district's budget issues in 2010, where cost increases had been held off for some time from the city's chargebacks. And so that was one of the kind of rationales in terms of the increase over the past 10 years. So that's one of the more significant ones. In terms of those other three line items, the officials, which is the bulk of that line item of the officials, temps, and other services, that reflects what the increasing costs have been around officials. Those are unionized, kind of contracted groups for each of the different sports. There's a group for each sport of each officials, and it essentially reflects the increases in those costs over the past 10 years. Similarly, while the equipment and supplies, has gone up since 2010, it actually, if you look at the prior slide, has actually taken a step back in the past couple years. So we have actually been spending less over the past couple years around equipment and supplies, despite the overall increase in the past decade. And then lastly, the transportation slide. This, again, is consistent, while it's a significant increase, is consistent with our overall transportation cost increase in the district. So the costs for athletics as it regards to transportation are consistent with our overall transportation increases. So some of these pieces are consistent with other ongoing kind of cost increases over the past 10 years.
What about the dues and fees? What's going on with the dues and fees?
The dues and fees, so do you want to speak to that, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, are you guys okay if we just throw questions, or do you want to wait till the end?
However you want to do this.
Sarah already had a long list going.
Yeah, do you want,
She felt like she got
we can
skipped.
finish up and then
Why don't we, Ms. Boffins, do you mind if we wait till the end and we we'll go through them afterwards? All right, thank you.
Great, okay, so we'll wait.
I'm up anyway.
Oh, you're up anyway, yes, okay. So go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, sorry.
Well, we're going to pivot to the kind of co-op conversation, right, to kind of conclude, to frame that up, and then we'll come to.
Do you think, so now would be a good time?
Well, no, I think let's finish this, and then I think it'll be good to kind of take the questions in summary. Yep.
Sounds good.
Thanks. So the cooperative teams, the MPA has a guideline to how you can co-op teams. So two things that are important here are can't have a competitive advantage, and the second piece is to grow the program so that eventually you can try to get back on your own again. So come together, grow your programs, come back on your own again. That's the idea of a co-op. Doesn't always happen that way. As you can see, we have boys and girls ice hockey. We've been together since 2011. Probably, actually definitely in the future of the next 3 to 5 years, we're not looking to split the two hockey teams again. However, we have been successful over the past 3 to 5 years with our hockey program, hosting another playoff game tomorrow evening. The second piece of that is the MPA requirements. Does require principal and board support. That is through a online form that you have to fill out and check that principal and the board and the superintendent support the co-op. They're 2-year co-ops. Every 2 years you have to renew them. So they just got everybody in the state on one cycle. So that was last fall. And so in 2 years from now, everybody in the state will have to reapply for their co-ops, every sport. The MPA is putting together a cooperative team committee because there was some talk this past winter, not only of us with ice hockey co-ops, but there was also a Nordic ski co-op committee that had certain teams break up that were part of co-ops, so they were allowed to practice together. But when they went to compete, they had to compete as individual schools because they changed the way that Nordic ski was scored. So 2 winters ago, we won a Nordic ski championship, state championship, as a co-op. This past year, Portland had to compete by themselves, and Deering had to compete, and Cheverus had to compete all by themselves at every race. So there's a little history of the co-op. Right now, currently, we have cooperative teams in ice hockey with Portland High School and Deering High School. Nordic ski, as I mentioned, has been Deering, Portland, and Cheverus. Wrestling has been Portland and South Portland. And field hockey is Portland and Deering High School. As you can see on the bottom of that slide, there are some pros and cons to the cooperative agreements. I would say the biggest pro is the cost savings, and the biggest con is the loss of individual school programming. So this past fall, we decided to co-op Portland and Deering field hockey. As you can see, we lost some players from Deering High School who decided not to play because we co-opted. And so that shows you sort of the loss of school programming and school pride when you co-op two teams. It's also difficult in travel for some kids to get to practice because now you're not practicing right outside your back door. You have to get a ride or something else to the other school to practice. The cost savings, as you can see in the second line there, these are approximate cost savings based on stipends that weren't used because we didn't have the same number of coaches. So this past fall we had 3 teams. We had a varsity, a JV, and a first team girls field hockey. I'm going to turn this over to Mike.
Thanks, Rob. And just to give you a specific on a cost saving, so last year there were new field hockey uniforms purchased for Deering. They weren't used, so those are going to be used for girls lacrosse this year. So there's a cost savings in this year's budget. So there's a specific example. For potential co-op programs, as we look at low participation numbers, and as Rob said earlier, nationally, the trend is for sports like field hockey, ice hockey to be losing numbers. Baseball, participation numbers going down. Lacrosse is up. Volleyball is up. Track is up. And we're seeing the same thing on our high school teams as well, the same interest. So sports that we might want to look at co-oping. The first 2 are probably the 2 at the top of the list for us as far as participation goes, golf and swimming. We had 2 golfers this fall. That wasn't enough for a team. You have to have 4 for a team to score. It didn't work out, actually. The co-op is a little entangled with golf, but we are going to look at it in the future. Swimming, we practice at the same pool, compete at the same pool. It's something that we think makes sense. Rob and I have talked about already. Our coaches are married and coach the programs together and work together in practices, and they have the same practice times. So it's something, and numbers have gone down as we saw in the previous slides. Indoor track, outdoor track, something maybe you look at to look for some efficiencies. Obviously looked at football in the past. Baseball numbers just seem to be going down, and at Deering our numbers are a little bit lower right now. Softball kind of hovering. Softball is a sport nationally that's on the rise though, so I'm not sure if that's just a 2-year blip. But boys tennis for us is low this year, and it's been that way for a few years. So a few sports we might want to look at in co-oping, and just for efficiencies, and it makes sense. I thought field hockey worked out well. Nordic ski worked out very well this year for us, and it worked for all 3 schools that participated as a co-op. So thank you.
And so just the last slide before, for us to wrap up is, as the superintendent mentioned at the beginning, our intent is to kind of bring forward at some future date, an opportunity for a resolution to kind of authorize that approval that Rob mentioned as part of the process, as part of the MPA requirement regarding establishment of co-ops. And so, we are interested in the guidance from the board around what that should look like. From our position, we think in terms of being able to move most nimbly, right, and identify the kind of best opportunities for co-op, that ideally there'd be flexibility to be able to pursue co-ops within district, right, where that makes sense in terms of, across Deering and Portland teams, or with other local public high schools. So again, as wrestling is the example, the current example of where Portland is co-opted with South Portland around wrestling. On the prior slide, baseball for Deering is an issue, but Portland could not be the number of players at Portland doesn't make them an option in terms of us co-oping with them. So if we were to sustain Deering participation, we would need to look outside of PPS for a co-op partner in that regard. Or with local private high schools, so just differentiating from the board perspective of whether there's a stance around, currently we've had the relationship, though, there's some technical changes around that, around Nordic skiing with Chevrolet, right? But is there a perspective from the board around us pursuing those co-op opportunities? So, again, tonight there's no action. This is just a kind of informational, right, presentation. But as we move forward, that's what we would seek to bring forward to you all in terms of approval, so that we have that documentation and kind of support to go back to as we move forward and examine each of these issues around potential co-ops. So, thank you very much. We look forward to some questions.
Thank you. We'll start with Mr. Balfan's question, and then we'll move on to Ms. Thompson.
Dues and fees.
Awesome. Thank you. Yep. So looking at the slide, athletics investments over time and looking at those cost categories, I know we went through different ones. One we didn't touch on were the dues and fees. That it looked like a 206% increase over FY10. Just wanted to see what that includes and then why the increase.
So the dues and fees line is our SMAA dues, which are our league dues, and also our MPA dues, and the fees are associated with the concussion protocol, sportswear, sports management. Oh my God, I just went blank. SMCMI, which is part of our mandate for all student athletes to make sure they take the concussion protocol test, which is free for the families, but we do pay the state of Maine a little bit of money, not $27,000. But the other piece of that is we've lost members in our SMAA schools when Maine Girls Academy closed. Our assessments went up. The dues for the MPA go up. We have more teams now. We added volleyball. We have more freshmen in JV sports. So you pay per sport, per team, as part of your MPA dues. So those fees have gone up, and the dues has gone up over the last 10 years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson?
So I don't expect answers. If you could just record the questions and then, because I know this is informational, so I don't want to bog down. So here are my questions. I know Mike McCollum's in the audience, and he was our AD at Portland High School when we did a unified boosters, and that was a fun time had by all. But I'd like to get a unified boosters update since we started that. If not a presentation necessarily, but a memo on the pros and the challenges, because I know that went over real well when we talked about it, and I think it's been somewhat successful since then. But it was a huge, hurdle for us, and we were also out of Title IX compliance, so kind of had to do it. So I have an open mind before I agree to this resolution. I need the following information. On co-curricular programs, you list out debate, band, and other areas. You list out the sports increases. So what I'd like to know is the costs associated with the co-curricular outside of sports. What are those? You talk about the investments that were made in athletics. What were the investments made for our clubs and the co-curriculars? Can you, if you could outline for us, because I know we talk about this every budget season too, is stipends. what we're paying for those. Are there costs associated? I know, for instance, Casco Bay High School has Frisbee, and there's no cost associated necessarily with the Frisbee team. What has costs, what doesn't have costs? What new clubs have been approved you talk about? And I know Casco is one of those that brings new ideas forward all the time. So I'm just curious about that. And then athletic costs, I guess. So I'm not going to get into it too much, but it's very interesting on the field maintenance and the rentals. I'm kind of concerned about that. We are one big city here in the city of Portland, and with our costs going up, I'll just say, the city's making more money and we're paying more money, and we're one big budget. And so I think there needs to be discussion and maybe a elected official discussion around that as well, because we can't make up for others' shortfalls sometimes. Under rentals, ice hockey, it's city-owned. Trove Ice Arena, I'd like to know how much we're paying the city for that. I know that was one of the largest expenses over time. I know it's important to a lot of people, but how much are we paying the city for the ice time? When you talk about athletics investments over time, I've been on the board since 2006, and so I don't really, while this may be a reflection 10 to 20, it doesn't reflect 6 to 20 when we had elimination of middle school sports, a lot of elimination of middle school sports. We went through some really, really tough budget seasons, and we eliminated and reduced a lot of things. And so I think that's in the best interest, too, of everybody to see how much we have eliminated, because I don't think this is really a true picture. It doesn't bring us back to the middle school when we eliminated a good portion of their livelihood and went to community sports like PACER and the football and so on and so forth. So that's that. And then cooperative teams, I'd like to know if we can get comparisons on what our surrounding districts are doing. So is South Portland, Cape Elizabeth, for instance, merging? Are they doing anything? I'd be interested to know what is everybody else doing around us, because we've already changed our class. We're not Class A anymore. And some sports we're not. Is that correct? Right. Okay. One had a puzzled look and one was nodding his head. So, and so that those are due to numbers, I know, but again, it's concerning. Cooperative teams, Title IX compliance. We've worked very, very hard to come into compliance, especially with the unified boosters and making sure that we stay in compliance. And so I want to know how. Does that play out with all of this discussion around cooperative teams? Sure. And while it doesn't have to, I know boys, girls don't have to be equal, right, but it has to be equal opportunity. And so I want to see, where we're laying out that. Mm-hmm. You talk about cooperative teams. I'm wondering if the students have been surveyed and what their thoughts are on this, and do they have other ideas of things that we can maybe change and do differently? I think that they're the ones that this is part of their academic world, and for a lot of kids, this is why they go to school. And so I want to know what the students have to say. Co-op teams, I'm almost at the end, I promise. I know we got quite a few emails on any kind of merging with a private school, and I know you brought this in with Chevrolet. So I guess when we talk about merging, I want to also talk about public schools. And how, we ended up granted Chevrolet's in Portland, but we have other private schools as well, and how is that all, Baxter Academy, for instance, how much are they participating? What's the participation rate from Casco? It doesn't include, it says Portland and Deering, and I know that Casco kids can choose which team to play for. So participation, I know at Casco, has been low over the years because it's hard for them to get to here to over there. And so how are we doing with that in enticing the students here to play for Portland and Deering? And are we making it an obstacle for them to get to your schools? Because that has been a challenge in the past, having a child at Casco and playing field hockey. It was very challenging. And last of my questions, swimming. I assume, and I probably should not assume, but swimming, does it happen at Riverton, which is another city-owned pool? Is that correct? Okay. So that's part of our rental fees as well. So if we could break out how much of our various activities involve a city-owned property and how that breaks out. I'd love to see that. And on the co-op programs, by doing that, what is the expected savings by doing so? Because, as you stated, it's 1.5% of our overall $118 million budget, I think, these days. So, again, it's 1.5%, and some people think it's a lot, some people don't think it's enough. So I'd just like to see what you expect for cost savings if we're talking about other things, consolidation of schools and things like that. I think we also need to look at this. In esports, maybe you covered that, but can you just answer what is esports?
So esports, this is, is now a growing new sport. So, it's video games.
Oh.
There are college scholarships available for esports. It's just a growing, it was referenced a number of times, what sports are on the upswing, what sports are on
So
the
not body
downswing.
movement per se, it's more like hand movement and, okay. All right. Great.
It's a hand-eye coordination.
Hand-eye coordination, okay, yes. More TV time, okay. Okay, that's all for now, thanks.
Ms. Bondo.
So those are my questions that I try to understand when we have a low participation has been declined over the years. And then we have a list of those sports. And then I see the volleyballs is a new sport, but it's already on decline. So those are do we already know? I know it's a national wide, but I want to know about us. What's the reason why it's in decline? Is about the low interest on the student, or what's the participation been all the time decline? Because the overtime budget investment is still going up, but we have a low participation and the decline on those other sports. So if those sports be on decline, why we need to have a co-op, then we can think about it, maybe have that one on the packet rec with the city, instead to have that one in our program. So the second question is that when we do the co-op, where our coaches are going? Do we co-op with the coaches too, or which coaches are leading the program on those kind of co-op?
So just briefly on that, and correct me if I'm wrong, one school is typically the host school. And so in that case, that has been kind of where the coach is paid, funded, and employed through. So, for example, in field hockey, the field hockey example, it was the Portland High coach, and you guys could speak to this more, but they're located at the host school. So in the co-op, it was the Deering players are joining kind of the Portland team, right? They're merged, but then it's kind of housed through Portland.
Okay. And the last question is about the cost. I think the stipends and benefits is for the coaches, right?
Yes.
So they are not considered to be the staff? Because we have a staff wages and benefits, so the coach are just a stipend, but not considered to be the staff.
So who is included in the staff?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Who's
included?
Go ahead
Yeah.
and answer that. Just what are the staff?
The staff positions are athletic directors, athletic trainers, and the additional secretarial support that supports the athletic departments.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Morioni?
Yeah, and includes salary and benefits for those folks. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here and for the presentation. So my questions are, definitely want to follow up a lot more on the field maintenance piece, as well as particularly around when you talk about co-op and who's the host and things like that. Just seeing that brief example of the decline and what was the sport it was, the co-op that dropped, for the field hockey example, had 18 the year before, and then it dropped to 3 from Deering, when you move it over to another high school. I just want us to be, conscientious of that fact and make sure at the very least when we're talking any co-ops that it becomes more of a balance, that who's the host, between the two schools, if it comes to that. The other piece around it is these graphs for me towards the end where it's, hang on, let me find it. The ones where it's specifically talking about the sport and the schools for 2019-20 really kind of mean nothing to me because, okay, the percentage ones, I get that. That one is helpful. But then you break it down by spring sports participation for the year. And the reason why they don't mean a lot to me is simply because the enrollment numbers drop so much for Deering that these in my opinion, aren't really a fair reflection of the schools necessarily for that year. If I would love to see more of a trend, because there have been higher enrollment years for Deering, and I just want, I'm not really, that's why these graphs don't mean a whole lot to me, honestly, just by that 1 year, simply because enrollment dropped so much for Deering last year.
So the we didn't want to overload data in the presentation, so there's an attachment on the board item that has the historical participation.
Yeah, I'll go to look to that, but mostly I say that because, who knows what's going to happen in the future, but I would love in some way, when, I think it was Sarah who just was talking about going out to the students to ask, what is it about what's happening? And I think that what I wonder about when we're trying to focus on equity and trying to ensure that students have opportunities, that we're also looking at the fact that we have students that maybe need to work, or maybe need to take care of siblings at home, or maybe can't get to a Portland High field in time, or they're at Casco and they can't do it. I have a feeling that we're going to hear a lot of those reasons, and I would really love to work on some of those issues or try and figure out better ways around those things before we say, nope, we're just going to scrap it now because we don't have enough participation, because having two, as you both know, or as all of you know, having sons that are very, very athletic in high school, and it was one of the main reasons they go to school. It's a backbone of their education to be well-rounded humans, in my opinion, and their bonds that they've made with their teammates and so forth. We were just talking about it in our public affairs meeting, how important it is. So I just want us to reflect a lot before even in the co-opting. I definitely see some benefits. The other note I would like to do a little bit more understanding about is when we co-op with a private school, I really want us to reflect on how much per athlete that private school pays to Portland Public Schools, because I don't really think that necessarily equates to a fair market value or fair value of what, when we look at a cost per athlete, I want that to be fair to our schools. I think that's all for now. This is definitely something I'm very passionate about, and want to make sure, again, for all of our students, that we're looking out for what their interests may be, and not just going off of just general numbers at face value right now. But thank you.
Thank you. Can I just, because I want to piggyback on something that's already been said a couple of times. So just as far as adding some data to, before we look at the resolution, maybe get participation broken out by subgroup, by race, and economically disadvantaged students, so that we can address some of the questions that were brought up. No?
No, we don't have good data for it.
Okay. As good or as close to accurate as we can present it, so we have an idea of what kind of participation we're getting. And I think some of the concerns that Ms. Morini brought up, thank you for bringing that up, really important piece of information. Do you mind if I go through another one? Real quick, did the city's pesticide ordinance change have any effect on the field maintenance cost?
Not yet, but we anticipate that it will.
Okay.
So it's not reflected in these figures yet.
Yeah, and I want to add something to a comment Ms. Thompson made about the pool at Riverton. We, just to add context to it, we also have a high utility cost that we reimburse the city for that facility, because we heat the pool. So it just gets really expensive at one point. Mr. Berg, why don't you shoot yours? I have another one, then I'll segue into something else.
Okay, thank you. Questions I have that can be answered another time that haven't been asked already are, what was the total student enrollment in 2010 compared to 2020, just so I can understand the percentage of students enrolled in athletics?
It's in the presentation.
It's in there? Oh, I missed that. Okay. What's the cost, if any, to students for participation? For the 75% of students that aren't involved in athletics, generally speaking, what do they wish they had access to after school, or what are they doing after school? And do we have an outing club, are my questions.
Mr. Varro?
Just another request for a data point. If we could get the total cost per sport and the total cost per athlete in each sport, I think would be just a helpful piece of information. I noticed that in our packet, we did get athletic participation by sport for the 2 high schools going back all the way to 2003, 2004. And it's interesting that just overall, there is a pretty significant drop, I think, across the board in sports over that period of time in general. And I think you mentioned that was just a trend nationally.
Well, I think the trends that we were speaking to were in respect to different sports in terms of sports, soccer being a sport that's growing in terms of participation. So it wasn't necessarily in terms of overall participation, the comments that were made earlier. It was there are various sports where participation is growing and participation is declining.
Yeah,
but I think there had been news, there had been a variety of news articles of overall decline in interscholastic participation in athletics. There was stuff in the Press Herald in the fall and so forth to that end.
It would be interesting to see if we could go back to maybe some earlier points before 2010. I think Ms. Thompson said too, just comparisons of the total cost, the per student cost, and I think Mickey mentioned that there's been an increase and yet declining participation. So I'm interested in kind of isolating what drives that. Any data that you have that could point to that would be helpful.
Can I just weigh in on this? I really am a little bit concerned about trying to go past 2010. Going back, in 2010, this district paid a consultant a significant amount of money to do the blue and red study, which we have in essence, so like it was done in 2010, nothing happened until 2017. This is our effort to do on the existing resources what the district paid people a considerable amount of money, and now you want us to go back to stuff that predated the blue and red study. It would have made sense to have that be a part of the blue and red study as opposed to now for us to try to do something that predates the 2010. This is a huge
I have it, probably all of it.
us.
In her garage.
I probably have all of it I could just give to you, because
That would be great.
Jamie, Karen, and I were the ones that went down to Boston to talk to the Red and Blue Foundation, and we got that whole thing started, and the unified boosters and everything. And I think the reason why is, to Anna's point and to Ms. Morioni, is this district, it looks like the cost per student is really high and the numbers are high, but over the years, it's from 2006 was really the impetus, and then when the district started taking the nosedive that we did financially, and we started eliminating a lot of things in this district. And I think that middle schools, really, we cleaned house on, and we brought a lot of stuff out to the public for them to take over. And we gave our uniforms away, and we gave away all kinds of stuff. So I'm happy to find every single thing I have, because it is significant. And I hear you about going back that far, but those years were really significant to this district. And I know Mr. McCollum is in the audience as well, and I don't want to mention him again, but, but I am. He probably has a lot of data. If he's a pack rat like me, I don't know, but, and we have, Rich up in Wyndham, who was here before that. So we have plenty of information, and I'm happy to try to gather it and be helpful to this process as much as possible.
Thank you. And sure enough, what an excellent segue. As part of the purpose of the co-op that we have on the handout is to try to grow participation in the programs in order to reestablish individual school teams. Mr. McCollum is here, as been mentioned. As any board member knows, since I arrived to this board, I've been talking a lot about some of the concerns that I have in how we see equitable participation in these youth athletic leagues that the city run, or that organizations run in the city. So there's a little bit of work that has been going on, because I'm assuming creating a feeder system into the high school sports is critical to reestablishing individual school sports. So I asked Mr. McCollum to be here today, and maybe if he doesn't mind coming up to the mic and for like 2 minutes, tell us a little bit about a work that he's helping to organize with these youth athletic leagues to help create feeder systems. And I was really hoping that our ADs and principals here could maybe, as is available, pitch in and help him with what he's trying to accomplish. He knows he has my full support in this work.
So thank you, and thank you, Sarah, for keep throwing me under the bus. But so yes, I was involved in the Red and Blue Foundation, and Mr. O'Leary and Mr. Daly. We spoke on the phone once. I really commend you for the work that you do. I've been in your chair and pulling together this data for today, and trying to increase participation at the high school level has been an ongoing battle, and I appreciate what you guys do for our high schools, and truly believe you guys can't do it on your own. There has to be two of you at all times, looking out for our school's best interest. So, as Mrs. Thompson said, and I don't know that I can do this in 2 minutes, Roberto, so
I didn't mean to
as
limit
Mrs.
you,
Thompson mentioned, I think it is critical. In 2006, 2007, the school board became very, it was put in a position where they had to make some significant cuts. And that unfortunately, what that did to our middle school sports programs and below, to me, is a part of the reason why we're standing here talking about our high school programs and the decline in the numbers. It was kind of passed off to our community leagues. Since I left the schools in 2010, and the reason why I left the position that these guys are in is I had multiple children. So the time commitment that these guys put in just wasn't there for me. So, but now my kids are involved in Portland youth sports. And what we're recognizing as we were out on the fields and in the gyms is from K through 6, I'd say even K through 8 if you include football, the demographics of our youth sports programs just aren't the same as the demographics of our schools. And the reason for that, and I believe, and this organization that we're starting called Friends of Portland Community Sports, believe that's because we're not connected to the schools. Ever since we've been placed outside, there's no connection anymore. And for youth sports growing up, there's always been that connection to the school, to the community school. So if you're in an elementary school, you're connected to that neighborhood. We're very proud of our neighborhood schools, but we're also very proud of our neighborhood sports programs. Well, now Portland sports programs have all become one. So now we've got to figure out a way to make this a community sports program for the whole city. And how do you create the sense of community around our youth sports? So for the first time, I believe, we pulled together league presidents from Portland Youth Football, Portland Little League, PACE Soccer, because we're all seeing the same trend. Demographics just aren't nearly the same in our youth sports program. So we have representation from the Portland Public Schools. We've been talking to the community centers and Portland Parks and Rec. We've pulled together this organization called Friends of Community Sports. We're in our infant stages. We've only had 2 meetings. Our 3rd meeting's coming up next week, and we're developing a board to establish a 501c3 and establish a 5-year kind of strategic plan. We don't believe we can change this overnight, but we believe we need to reconnect our schools to our youth sports programs at the elementary level. A lot of schools and districts around us are doing it top down. It's a feeder system. The schools create the community. We don't have that luxury here in Portland. So I believe that by reaching out at the elementary level and with the help of our community leaders, our volunteers, that this was placed on back in 2006 and just before the Red and Blue Foundation. We want to get back into building equity amongst our programs. That's the number one goal. We want to build a sense of community around youth sports, and we also want to put our families first. So while we're working with the community, we talk about our field programs, which I'm astonished at the field maintenance costs for you guys. But we also want to make sure Portland kids are being looked after first. I think a lot of times the city's responsible for revenue-driven sports programs to come in and pay to use our facilities. Our kids need to be first, and our kids need to be first from the elementary up. And our sports programs demographics need to look like our school programs demographics. So Friends of Portland Community Sports, it's on its way, and I just whatever we can do and get support from the high schools. And one thing that just came up sitting in this meeting is field hockey's not represented at the youth sports level. We're looking at a co-op team. Kids don't even know about field hockey until they get into middle schools. So that's another thing that we could add at the youth level. So we're looking for your support. We're looking for the support of the ADs to kind of build this feeder system from the ground up so we can hook these families and get them to want to stay in Portland and not look elsewhere and not get involved until they're in the 7th grade when it's part of the schools. So that's our goal. So I thank you for your time and anything I can do to help you guys, because thanks.
Appreciate it, Mr. McCollum. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Anything else from the board? Excellent. So obviously, it's just a long list of questions and data to go back to. I'm sure you guys will do your best to help us be informed. I appreciate the engagement from the board in this issue. Like I said a moment ago, anyone that's talked with me since I joined the board knows that I've brought up athletics and my concerns about when we did away with the middle school programming, the way that affected the participation rate in regards to how it compares the demographics compared to our schools. So I'm looking forward to see how the board can support growing these sports and engaging more families into what clearly is an important part of their academic experience. Right. Yes, Ms. Thompson, of course.
I know Harvey is right thrilled with us tonight, but of a list of questions, but do I dare ask?
Of course.
When? Because if we're going to be asked about a resolution and we have budget season upon us and you're very, very busy with all that, when can we get the answers?
No,
Not tomorrow.
We have to go back and look at the list. It is an extensive list of additional questions. Some of these are fairly easy, some of these are not that easy. So my commitment would be to get to you guys what are the questions and what our path is for getting answers to them.
Okay.
But we obviously won't bring anything until, we have a substantive discussion about it.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thompson? Yes, I'm sorry, Ms. Marino, excuse me.
I guess reflecting on this presentation tonight a little bit more, what was the actual intent? In other words, I know we're leading into budget, and with the intent, was the intent for us to go, yes, co-ops are a great idea, go forth, co-opt all, as much as you can, to cut costs? Because right now, I still don't quite see and understand what cost savings we could potentially, from the presentation. I mean, I just saw the pros and cons reflected back and looking at the numbers of where we are. But I guess is that to be determined? Is that to be forthcoming?
This did, as I did in my teeing up of this item, had a dual purpose. One was to make sure that you had the foundations of, how much we spend, what we spend it on, sort of broken down by sports. And I know that we can do more and go back further, but that was present day. We want you to understand. This came up in the context of the working group on cost savings. So this is one of the items that we are doing our due diligence to put in front of you as we walk into the budget process, so that if we are looking for places to save money, this is what you're looking at. This is what the impact would be. This is the sports that have high enrollment, the sports that have low enrollment, and so on. So that was one purpose. The second purpose is we need guidance around future co-ops. In the course of, and so part of this is to get direction from you around things like, is it okay to co-op with Chevrolet? Do we have universal approval for co-oping, or do we need to come to you for every specific sport? So that is part of the, the discussion that we wanted to begin today. And then in the course of preparing this presentation, we looked at the fact that in some cases, co-oping actually saves money. And so to the extent that, as we get into the budget process, you're looking at places where we can potentially save money, co-ops might be one of those places. We weren't asking for a rah. We're trying to provide information so that you can make informed decisions.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just didn't know where the resolution part came necessarily into it, because I'm not ready right at this point
No,
to
we're
support
not,
any
that's
resolution.
why we didn't bring one.
Okay.
So
Good.
it's the beginning of that conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. So if we don't have anything else, thank you guys for the presentation. Appreciate, again, you fielding the questions, and we look forward to keep talking and seeing how we can help. Great. All right. All right, next on the agenda, let me see, where am I?
Don't go anywhere.
Yeah, stick around. Old business. A consideration and action to approve all non-substantive changes to policies in Book D. Is there a motion? Ms. Morioni, second by Mr. Atkinson. Will the superintendent please speak to the motion?
Yes, I'm going to turn this over to Aaron to walk us through the proposed changes to the Book D, which is our fiscal management book. These policies, normally, as you know, we try to do a workshop around a substantive change in policies, or a large number of policies, because these are, for the most part, not substantive. We've had so many things on the agenda that we did not do that. So we're going to kind of do a workshop, a running workshop, as we walk through these policies. I think it's important for the board to know that these policies have been reviewed and approved by the policy committee, so it has had a substantive board review prior to this, and of course, they've also been reviewed by our attorney. In fact, most of the changes originated from our attorneys highlighting that these are policies that required changes, and as you'll see as we go through them, many of the changes are really minor. They're just, naming conventions and things along those lines, but some of them have more substantive pieces. So Mr. Townsend is going to walk through each of the policies, talk about, what is different in them, and then we're going to ask you to vote on each of the policies separately. So I apologize, and our process is better when we actually have a workshop around this, but we just, we have too many things on the agenda, and so we're trying to kill two birds with one stone. So with that, Aaron.
Okay. Hopefully folks have, the piece that was included in terms of, because there's a lot of documents that we roll through. So we'll take them one by one. So the first policy is policy, policy DA. And so this is our multi-year budgeting and fiscal management. So there were, just some minor revisions to this one that included the, the board nomenclature updating to kind of modernize, our current references to the board, and some additional legal references were the primary changes for this first policy.
Any questions?
Thank you.
So I'm sorry, so Aaron, are you going to walk us through, are we just going to do the whole? I'm
So
sorry.
I do think that we need to vote on each of these individually.
Okay, so we're
because
gonna do
each
the
of
book.
policies is a separate policy, and there's a chance that somebody might be, have a concern over one change to a policy and not, and instead of trying to bulk, have one vote, we probably should have a vote on each of them.
Okay, perfect, so we'll do it. Okay, so are there any questions on, so the only reason I'm pausing is because the motion is for the book. So unless we have a motion for the individual policy, it'd be awkward to vote individually.
So I think you should redo it and have a motion on policy DA.
Okay, so is there a motion?
So, yeah, I don't know.
So we've done books before altogether, and these are non-substantive changes. So if it's okay with, unless there's a reason not to, if we can run through them and see what these changes are, and then vote them all as a book as the motion indicates right now. Does that make sense? Ms. Atkinson?
Chair, maybe if there is a particular policy that's sticky that we want to remove, we could amend and remove one policy or as needed, and do the whole thing as one slate and take the other one up separately, or subsequently.
That seems reasonable to me.
That makes sense.
Good. So what, no, that's fine. Ms. Trevorrow, do you have an opinion?
I'm comfortable voting on all of them.
Okay, good. So then, Aaron, why don't we kind of just keep running one by one, and then as questions come up, as you go through the changes that each policy has, we can then identify if there's one that we need to set off to the side and do that through an amendment to the motion.
I may have missed this, but we do have a matrix that sort of summarizes all of this in the packet. So you have what's a minor revision versus what's a more substantive revision and so on. So, okay.
Excellent. So then, are there any questions on policy DA? All right, seeing none. Do you want to move on to DBC?
Yep. So the next is DBC, school budget adoption. Again, minor revisions here to this one as it names. So various names and references are cleaned up and clarifies a few dates in terms of our process.
Any questions on DBC? Seeing none. All right, we can move on to DFD.
Okay. Let me jump ahead. So DFD, gate receipts and admissions. Again, there's just a few minor nomenclature reference updates. That one.
Any questions on DFD? If you guys need a minute, I know we're going through just the changes quickly. If anybody still needs time, just kind of give me a head nod. We'll move on to DI.
Okay. So we can go to DI. That is not, just this may. I'd suggest we actually go to DJR. Just if people are scrolling through the policies, that's the policy that follows next. I think it'll be easier to just go through the policies in order and bounce around on the summary sheet than trying to scroll back and forth through the book of policies.
Thank you.
So if we could, so DJR is the Purchasing Code of Conduct. Let me scroll down to that. So that one, we did not have any
Revisions. Yeah.
well, yeah. There were some substantive revisions, I think, on DJ. The Federal Procurement Manual is a separate document, but so these reflected significant updates as it regards to procurement for federally funded projects, and kind of conforming our language to some city charter. To statute and city charter language. So there are additionally some other small legal references and nomenclature updates, but this essentially was trying to update it to be in alignment with some of the city charter language and some of the federal, federally funded project expectations.
So this is actually DJ, not DJR, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Isn't it D?
And this one actually has some substantive changes.
Correct. Yep.
So is this DJH? That was formerly DJR?
Yes.
DJH is the next policy, so
Okay.
this one is, the nomenclature. It was formerly known, so this is policy, here, once. Yeah, because there's DJH, which is the Code of Conduct, which follows. I mean, there was a merging of the two. There were two prior policies that I believe are kind of coming together as DJH. So DJR, is ultimately, and I don't know if this is how, is being merged. So down the purchasing and contracting Code of Conduct, which was formerly DJH, or formerly DJR, now DJH, so I apologize. That may not be clear at all.
Yeah. I think, can we just skip the DJs and go back to DI? And then I do remember that we actually, it does reflects that it has substantive revisions, and it is complicated, and I don't think that we're like 100% clear on it. I'm not, in this moment, I'm totally foggy on what we're doing with this one, so I would rather that we just hold off and focus on the ones that are simple and come back to that.
Okay. So then we'll move forward to policy DI, the fiscal accounting and reporting. So as that lists, there were some shifts of kind of nomenclature and then alignment that were recommended to align with the city charter language.
We move on. Next.
I took a picture of it. You can look. So we're looking at this is the typology right here.
I don't see DIA.
Fiscal. Ledger.
I think DIA is next, but it's missing in the book.
Not here.
It's not here. Okay. So we'll come back to that one too. DIC then.
So the Budget Oversight and Administration. So, as the summary states, clarification in superintendent's authority, less than 5% of a given line item, and some nomenclature updates, and then updates around the contents of the monthly kind of budget report.
The 5% is not, there wasn't a different percentage before, it just didn't have any percentage at all, so it's just clarifying that. Okay. So it's not like we're increasing or decreasing that number.
Correct, yeah.
Any questions? Okay, we can move on to the next one.
So this is DJ, which I think we're going to bring back all of the DJ ones in one bundle, so that that's clear. So
that, and that's DJ, DJC, DJG, and then the DJR, that is DJH. So
Well-
all the DJs, we're gonna go back?
I think,
No,
no,
it
I think it's DJ and DJR and DJH that are the ones that are all related to each
Yeah.
other. I think that DJC and DJG can be moved forward. Those are, they stand alone. One is vendor relations, the other
Yeah.
one is
Petty
the petty cash accounts, and I think that they have just
Minor
minor
revisions.
changes. I don't think there's any reason to hold them up. I think that.
Yeah, so DJC then?
So DJC, the petty cash accounts, as you can see, there's just one updated reference to, cross-reference to a policy.
Okay, and DJG?
So again, there's just some simplified language, nomenclature, and legal and policy references that are updated.
Any questions? Okay, we can go to the next one. DK?
So again, these continue in the vein, DK, just some minor nomenclature updates for policy DK, the payment procedures.
Next one? DM.
Policy DM, the cash in school buildings. So again, that has just a few updates to the, current nomenclature for the board and so forth.
And DN as in Nancy.
Yep. So the final one, similar, some nomenclature updates, a little language clarification, and some legal reference updates.
No questions. Great. All right, so then, should we then think about coming to DJR's, to DJR one at a different meeting?
Yep.
So can we put an amendment on the floor to take, only DJR needs to be removed?
DJR, DJH.
And DJ.
So
And
DJ,
DJ.
DJR, and DJH.
Yeah.
Can we, this,
So
tomorrow?
so moved.
Are there any questions on that? So what we're asking is to remove those three policies from this book so that when we vote on it, we can review those policies later. Any questions on that motion?
Did
On
you
that?
get a second?
So I put it out there, Ms. Trevorrow. Oh, okay, Ms. Morioni second. Ms. Trevorrow motion, Ms. Morioni second, sorry. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none. Do we have any public comment on the amendment to the motion? Seeing none. Any board discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of the amendment to remove the policies DJ, DJR, and DJH from the main motion to approve the changes on the Book D? And that's unanimous with the students voting in favor. All right, back to the main motion. Are we ready? We've gone through all of them, so we're ready to vote on the book. All those in favor of pardon me? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. Is there any public comment on the main motion? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. Any board discussion? I'll just say, again, that this is the first policy committee meeting that Mr. Townsend was driving the bus. There was a lot of cool references and analogies made that night, if you remember. I think someone got thrown under the bus at one point. Yep. So I appreciate all the work that you've put into it and organizing it. There is, just I want to point out once again, there is a there's a helpful chart in our package that has a brief summary of all the changes with all the different policies. So I think that that's the best way for us to reference what we've done, what we're about to vote. So having said that, all those in favor of approving all non-substantive changes to policies in Book D, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting with the majority. Thank you. All right. Thank you, sir. All right, new business. There are no comments on first reads. We have a first read to approve revisions to policy JLCD, administering medications to students. And we have a first read to approve the proposed 2020-2021 school calendar. All right, next to personnel items. Here comes Barbara. Consideration and action to renew the contracts of principals for the 2020-2021 school year who have been employed more than 2 years pursuant to MRSA Title 20-A, Chapter 504, Section 13301, Employment of Principals. Is there a motion? Ms. Thompson, second by Mr. Balfin. Superintendent, speak.
Just very quickly, I just wanted to point out that these items were added as action items, and they were not in the original packet when it was sent out last week, and that was an oversight on our part. We left off the contract renewals, which we're asking you to act on tonight. By statute, we're required to act on these renewals by March 1st. So if you were to decide that you didn't wish to consider them because they did not have the required notice, we could potentially be subject to a daily fine for each contract that was not renewed. Our next meeting is scheduled for next week, March 3rd, so it's not a huge time lag, but I do want to point out that there are no non-renewals associated with this action, so this is simply acting on our recommendation to continue and renew our great team of school leaders.
Thank you. There's no public comment on personnel items. Are there any questions on the motion? Any board discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of renewing the contracts of principals for the 2020-2021 school year who have been employed for more than 2 years pursuant to MRSA Title 20-A, Chapter 504, Section 13301, Employment of Principals, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting with the majority as well. Thank you. Next, consideration and action to renew the contracts of principals for the 2020-2021 school year who have been employed less than 2 years pursuant to MRSA Title 20-A, Chapter 504, Section 13301, Employment of Principals. Is there a motion? Ms. Trevorrow, second by Mr. Balfant. The superintendent, please speak to the motion.
Same as the previous one.
Right, nothing.
Barb, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Ms. Stoddard. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, there is no public comment on personnel items. Any board discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving the contracts of principals for the 2020-2021 school year who have been employed less than 2 years pursuant to MRSA Title 20-A, Chapter 504, Section 13301, Employment of Principals, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting in favor, with the majority. And given that it's before the hour of 10 o'clock, it is 8:48, surprisingly early. Is there any public comment on items not in this evening's agenda? All right, you know the drill. Please come up to the podium, give us your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board.
Stephen Sharp at Cumberland Avenue. I was expecting a whole gaggle of people who want to come up and speak to you, but apparently I'm the only one tonight. Just 2 quick things, really. One, in previous years, I've always had to tell, during the budget cycle, remind the superintendent, whoever it was at the time, that the first version of his budget does not have the enrollment figures in the book. And he always says, well, it never happened in the past, but it's because it never gets in the first cut, and then the next guy looks at it, so it's never there. So now I'm reminding you well in advance to put the enrollment figures in your version of the book so that your predecessor, next year, 10 years, 5 years?
Successor.
Successor, yes. Knows that, oh, that's supposed to be in the first version of the book. So, and the other thing I wanted
Miranda, you got that? Give me the thumbs up.
The only other thing I want to comment on is that esports is not a sport, should not have been referred to as a sport. It is at most a co-curricular activity, and is just playing with a controller and should not be encouraged by school systems. It is not a sport. It is just stuff kids do after school.
Is there any other public comment? You don't need to give us your name, your address, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board.
Good evening. My name is Dawn Fisher. I live at 46 Longfellow Street in Portland. I'm here as a PEA member and as an employee. I work as an occupational therapist for the district. Our department has 7 therapists with anywhere from 2 to 34 years of experience of practice. Amongst our ranks, we have a recent past president of the Maine OT Association, our state professional organization, and USM's most recent Fieldwork Educator of the Year. Portland Public Schools OTs have passed the National Board Certification in Occupational Therapy exam, required to be a registered OT. We all maintain Maine state licenses, and we take seriously the requirements of maintaining our licensure. Our professional education includes, but is not limited to, human development, developmental movement patterns, primitive reflexes, neurology, cognition, executive function, sensory processing, musculoskeletal systems, kinesiology, group dynamics, mental health, and assistive technology. We are holistic and client-centered health providers who deliver a great return on investment.
Good evening. My name is Tracy Falla. I live in Cumberland. I'm a PEA member and occupational therapist for Portland Public Schools, proudly, for the past 15 years. OTs can work across a lifespan in a variety of settings, but in school systems and in general, OTs have a PR problem. People don't know what we do. So that's part of why we're here. There's also an ask. Many people don't understand what we do, so our work primarily is to work with students with disabilities. We try to maximize their independence with all their occupations, so their jobs at school, namely, participating in their education, but also social participation, activities of daily living, which includes dressing, feeding, hygiene. We are considered a related service under IDEA. You know how we love our acronyms, right? So that's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And our service times get written into students' IEPs, more initials, the Individual Education Act under Special Ed, where it becomes a legally binding document. So while working directly with students is our primary focus, and truly the most fun, there is approximately half of our time that needs to be spent on other things. So our workload responsibilities include things that you might not know. Like for every session, we have to do daily Maine care billing documentation for each session with each kid every day. And it's time consuming, but it is also a cost recoupment for the district. We have to write plans of care to coordinate with that Maine care billing. We have to attend the IEP meetings as regular as well as staff meetings. We evaluate many students. We write up evaluations. They are long, time-consuming, and important. We plan student treatments. We develop intervention plans. May we have more time?
Because you had 2. You didn't get...
No, I did not.
You still have time.
We consult with the students' teams to include the staff and the family. And under IDEA law, we also participate in something called RTI, Response to Intervention, and that is meant to reduce unnecessary referrals to special ed, so that's delivered to regular education students. And we travel in between all the schools. That's just to name a few of the things we do.
So you may still be asking, what do we do? On any day, you may find us helping a student or adult work more ergonomically, working with students to independently put on socks and tie their shoes, zip their jackets, make a pizza at Pat's food service program, point to a preferred object as a means of communication, perhaps reach for that object that they are seeking, develop fine motor skills required for manipulating a pencil or to use scissors, open their lunch containers, write and illustrate a story, practice self-regulation strategies, cope with the sensory experience of eating lunch in a loud and busy cafeteria or attending a school assembly, throw a ball to a peer at recess, or use voice typing to tell their story.
So now for the ask. As you can see or hear, we have great jobs, and we work for a great district. But our workload has grown so large, we're not logistically able to meet the students' needs. More details will follow in a letter to you, to the members of the school board. But right now, we want to get to the point and say, Portland Public Schools needs additional occupational therapists to serve our students and give them the time designated in their IEPs. Additional therapists would also help allow Portland Public Schools OTs to help support the social emotional learning goal. We understand the budget is tight. We also think it's important for you to know that we have been asking for additional staff for the past 6 years. We've provided the Office of Student Support Services data and references to support our request. We're interested in working collaboratively to develop a formula that will allow the district to determine an appropriate workload that will allow Portland OTs to maximize our main care billing for services and provide students with the service hours designated in their IEPs, as well as to honor the fourth tenet of the Portland Promise. So in closing, the most important thing a community can do is to invest in its students, which is why you're all here as well. So thank you for your continued collaboration and support, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll close the floor for public comment. I'd be remiss if I did not, and we don't normally respond to public comment, and I don't intend to respond, but I want to add, so my wife is an occupational therapist, has been for 22 years. I'm a PTA, so there's at least one member of the board that's intimately familiar with the role of OTs. Just wanted to throw that out there. Having said that, we've closed the public comment section of our meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn the business meeting? Ms. Trevorrow, second by Ms. Bondo. All those in favor, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting in favor. We've adjourned at 8:56 p.m. Just a quick note, I should have said this before we adjourn. We're going to have a workshop to update the board on the 3 BFOF school projects remaining. And that, is that going to be on TV? And that will be televised and recorded, which will be available on our YouTube channel in the near future. Okay, thank you all.